We all want to have that sense of energy, joy, and fulfillment in what we do. But the question is, how do we do that? The first foundational step is having that communication impact through collaboration. Next is focusing on that working genius, because that's going to give us the insights to what gives us energy, joy, and fulfillment in the work or cause that we apply ourselves to in this world. And finally, there's that emotional intelligence. All of these things don't work together unless we are thinking about what our guest today calls the law of levers. How the decision over here can make an impact or a ripple effect over there. How this decision in one division of an organization can impact another division in the organization. The cause and effect. How engaging with our internal customers impacts our external customers. How the decisions that our leaders make impact the middle management team as well as the rest of the organization. Our guest today has an incredible ability to be able to diagnose and look at organizations and their leaders and help them identify those areas of opportunity and those gaps. What is holding you back as a leader? What is holding you back as an organization? Something that actually may be coming out is a symptom and may not be the root of the issue. And our guest today is going to dive deeper into this conversation because we have to fix the root of the problems in order to dream big and bring about amazing solutions to the world. Grab your pen and paper and let's buckle up for a conversation today with Danny Pippin. On today's episode of the GST Factor podcast, I have Danny Pippin. Hey, Danny, how are you?
Great. How are you doing?
Good. Danny, I'm so excited for you to be on the show today and to be talking to our listeners about all the things, and we'll dive into that soon. But tell our listeners a little bit about your story and your background.
Yeah. How much time do we have? 2 hours for the background?
Yep.
Okay. This is great. The reason I say that, I was on a podcast. We were doing a podcast recently, and they're like, just give a quick intro. 45 minutes later, I was like, and that's me. I'll make it quick. So I grew up in Middle Tennessee, just about an hour and a half northeast out of Nashville. Left home, 18, immediately I've got to get out of this small town. We had one red light that was put in as we were graduating. So I was like, I got to go. So through that, went to college, went to Western, went to MTSU, and I got into telecom. And so we sold local long distance cell phones, XM satellite radio, a lot of things. So by the time I was 23, I was a regional training director for this telecom company out of Dallas. So I had about 120 employees across 7 states. Loved it. Loved it. I did a lot of networking, a lot of recruiting, and a lot of training. That was my primary role. And then the parent company filed bankruptcy. So as I lay in the fetal position crying, a buddy of mine reached out and said, hey, would you come help me for a tax-free weekend in Asheville, North Carolina? I said, absolutely. That sounds great. I've never been. Where do you work? He said, I work for the Buckle. And I was like, dude, I love Buckle. Let me back up and just pause for a second. This is before they got bedazzled and MMA. I kid. This is a great company. So I went out there, talked to people, sold clothes, loved it. Drove home, packed my car, moved to Asheville to work with him. And so went from regional training director to sales associate retail at the time, making $4 an hour plus commission. It's like something's got to change. So anyway, I ended up moving back to Tennessee, opening the Buckle in Murfreesboro, worked with them, ended up getting promoted to store manager, moved back to Bowling Green, Kentucky, ran a store there. I'm going to go really quick and hit some waves. That's a little bit of background, how I got into the retail industry. Worked with PacSun for 6 years. ran low volume, mid volume, new concept, number one store in the company out of 1,000 stores at the time. Loved it. Loved my supervisor, Star Hudgens. Big fan, in case you get a chance to see this. And then got promoted to a district manager. So I had 8 stores across 3 states, got promoted again, and then had 13 stores in between Pittsburgh and Philly. I don't know if you've ever been between Pittsburgh and Philly. Not a lot there. But there was 13 stores for PacSun. They had a lot of stores. So anyway, love the company. I got a text at 12:31 a.m. from somebody that said, hey, Lucky Brand is looking for a district manager out of Nashville. And I said, send them my info. Now, here's the reason why. I loved my company, but my fiance was still in Nashville. And I've been gone for 2 years. And so I said, yeah, let's do it. So I moved back, started working with Lucky Brand. And during my time with them, 5.5 years, opened probably about 15 locations, and then oversaw about 26 locations in 15 states. So loved it. Loved my team. Loved the industry. But eventually I kind of hit this lid, if you will. Like I felt kind of stuck. I wasn't progressing. And so I started looking for outside resources to learn and grow. I got connected with John Maxwell, author, speaker, number one leadership expert in the world. And I joined his team to get certified as a professional coach and started doing that within my company, taking John's content, training it within Lucky Brand. And then 4 years later, I left and started my own coaching and consulting business, and been doing that since 2018, kind of full time. And then I got recruited by a dear friend of mine, Dina Metter, who is the director of entrepreneurship at Vanderbilt, the Wondery, their innovation entrepreneur center. And she calls me one day and says, I've got an idea, which is always my favorite words out of people's mouths. I've got an idea. And I was like, oh, what is it? And she's like, what do you think about virtual try-on for apparel brands online? And I thought, it's like, if you can figure this out, this is game changer. Like literally, this is the future of how people will shop for clothes online. And so I said, I don't know how to help you. I'm not a tech person. I can barely use my phone. I have to give it to my wife and go, I don't know what it's doing. So they went to go build the tech, come back about 2 years later and said, would you like to be involved? I came on kind of consulting for about 6 months. Through all that time, I'd been head of stores, head of ecom as a consultant. So I had a little bit more insight on that side. I was like, well, I know who you're selling to and what the needs and wants are and the challenges are from that side. And so after about 6 months, I came on as their COO. And I think it's been almost 4 years now, which is amazing. And so, yeah, that's probably way more information than you needed. But I'll pause there. And maybe there's
it's awesome. No, I love your diverse background and all the things that you've touched. And at times it's like, how does it connect? And then it always connects, which I always love. So let's talk a little bit about when you are going into organizations and working with their teams. You know, I kind of think of you like a people transformation ambassador, if you will. And let's talk about, what does that framework look like? And I know that you have the John Maxwell background and some other backgrounds and certifications, but what is Danny's framework when Danny is going in and saying, how can these people transform into what this company is going to need?
Wow. Yeah, that's a great question. So when I work with organizations, I take them through a 4-part process, right? So there's this, we need to assess and analyze, evaluate, and then we create a strategic growth plan, right? Now, there's a lot of assessing and analyzing and evaluating that goes into that. And there's a lot of tools that I use, and I'll come back to that. The second part is once we kind of figure out that plan, the second part for me is I do business leadership coaching. Maybe some people that watch this are familiar with John Maxwell, but in his book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, he talks about the law of the lid. So if you think about leadership being 0 to 10, and your leadership ability is a 5, it puts a cap, it puts a lid on your business because the business will never outgrow a 4. Now, a lot of times people are like, we're trying to build teams, we're trying to hire people. And I'm like, great. Well, a 6 won't work for a 5. So it literally puts a cap. So for me, the second part that I have to do is I have to coach the business owner, preferably, or if it's within a department, the business leader, because I have to raise their level of awareness, their skill, their talents, their abilities to increase the business. If not, the business is stuck. The business will never outgrow the level of thinking that the business owner or leader brings to it. So I've got to coach the leader, right, to raise the level of awareness and develop their skills. That's the second part. Third part is I do skill building workshops. And so this is part of maybe what you're talking about. So one of the first things I typically do is I do a communication impact assessment. So how are people wired? It's based off DISC. We use the Maxwell method because it's leadership based and communication focused. But I do a communication impact assessment with the team and the leader about how is each individual wired? Why do they do the things that they do? And why do they not do the things that they know they should do? How do they communicate? How do they understand not only their style, but other people's styles? The thing that comes to mind for me for this is, are you familiar with the golden rule? Yeah. Treat others the way you would want to be treated, right? So we kind of talk about the platinum rule. Treat others the way they want to be treated. So that's a principle around people because it's like, well, this is how I communicate. Okay, well, how's that working for you? Right? Well, you got to flex your style. So we do some skill building. First, we do communication. Second, we do working genius. As you mentioned, certified in a lot of things. Obsessed with working genius through Patrick Lencioni's group, the Table Group. That's where you find energy, joy, and fulfillment in the work that you do. The third workshop that I take people through initially is around emotional intelligence. I can spend all day talking about the emotional intelligence piece and why it is critical, but that's where we kind of tie those things together. And then from there, we look at specific business areas that we're wanting to improve, and then we do skill building around those. But that's kind of a foundation, and we go. The fourth part that I do is around group coaching. As I mentioned, I have to coach the business leader, but now I got to come back in and take the skills that we're learning and then how do they practically apply it and raise their levels as well.
And
yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm going to stop. I'll pause there because I know there's another framework that I use on the front end of that, but that's how I do it internally.
No, and I think what's so important is when people are thinking, and you and I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. We're both entrepreneurs ourselves. I think people, when you are growing or scaling or preparing, whether you're preparing to grow it and manage it, or whether you're preparing to grow it to sell it and exit, people think, oh, I just need to do X, Y, Z, but they may not be doing the right thing at the right time. And I think what I really appreciate about all of those different steps when you are working with that internal team is saying, we've got to look at that communication piece. We have to look at that, what does bring you that energy, joy, and fulfillment? And then we have to look at the emotional intelligence. And one of the other concepts that you and I have talked about at great length too is everything is connected. And especially as entrepreneurs, as they're thinking of when to do things, because they struggle with that prioritization. And within the GSD factor framework, we talk about that now, next, and later, and how you can make that very feasible, very agile, very flexible. But I think what people forget when they're prioritizing and then taking action and getting that shit done is what you like to call the law of levers.
Yes, law of the levers is what
law
I
of the
say.
levers.
Yes. I think to your point, right? Because I love everything that you've built about GSD, right? I remember in retail, I used to say, GSD is my gym, tanning, and laundry, right? If you remember Jersey Shore, I'm like, we got to get shit done. But unfortunately, people are getting shit done in the wrong order. And so, part of the reason we called it law of the levers, law of the lever, my wife goes, "You mean lever?" I'm like, well, one of our business partners is British, so we say levers. Shout out to Mel. So there was 3 consultants here in town that we kept meeting and kept talking, and they kept asking me questions and said, "Tell us more about this. Like, you're working with this client and they're wanting to help you solve this, but that's a symptom, not the cause." And so they're like, "Help me with this result." And I'm like, "Great, we can look at your results, but we have to look at the cause. The results is an effect. We have to change the cause." And they're trying to change the effect, which doesn't work. Let me give you a quick example of this. There was a nonprofit reached out to a friend of mine and said, "Hey, we have a messaging problem." And so he's doing his discoveries, having the conversation. He's a brilliant branding person. And he's like, you do have a messaging problem. Let's have a second follow-up conversation. I want to bring Danny into this conversation. So he's like, something's going on. You need to, hop in on this. So we actually flew out to their headquarters. We spent 2 days with them, and I basically just sat, listened, and took notes. He's doing his branding, messaging thing. And I was like, you do have a problem. You have a problem with messaging. But what they were doing is they were yanking on this messaging lever, trying to make things happen. If they pull that lever and they get the donations, they did not have the right people in the right role with the right responsibilities to handle that. Additionally, operations, which is your sweet spot, right, is they did not have the systems and processes in place to handle that. So if they would have pulled that lever and got the influx, chaos, right, would have ensued. And that's the thing that kept coming back to me as I went back and I started analyzing, the stores that I've worked with, over 70 retail locations, everything from the telecom, all the, 50 businesses I've worked with as a consultant. I said, oh my God, they are misdiagnosing the problem. And so the 3 of us sat down and we created this framework called Law of the Levers. Law of the Levers, as I like to say. Sorry, it's just fun to say. If you want to try it, you can. But basically, we came up with these 6 areas of business. Let me back up. There's 8 areas of business. There are 4 external and there are 4 internal areas. And what we do through this framework is we help them look at the results and then trace back to the cause and go, okay, what do you want to do? And they're like, we want to change the marketing. Right. If you do that, what are the downstreams effects? So let's do external, for example. We want to increase sales. Okay, great. Let's look at your sales process. Okay. Is it a sales problem? No, it's not a sales problem. Is it a product problem? Nope, product's great. Product fits good. Is it a marketing problem? Marketing's, seems pretty. Oh, it's a branding problem. So we kind of look at the 4 externals, like you have branding, you have marketing, which marketing is your customers, right? You have your sales, and then you have your product. So we're looking at those 4 external levers and go, which one are you trying to pull? And the reason you can't increase sales is because you have a product problem. It's not a sales problem, it's a product problem. Or you don't have a product problem, you just have a marketing problem. But they're misdiagnosing. Internally, we look at purpose, vision, goals. We look at your team. We look at your operations. And then we look at your internal product, which is culture.
And I think what ties so well to within the GSD Factor Life is as you are assessing, you have to be inquisitive. You've got to be curious. And you have to be okay with what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah.
Because so many times business owners, founders are so close to it that, well, it can't possibly be this. And they dismiss it. And you have to be curious, not judgmental. And you can't say, oh, it can't be that. You have to let it be. You have to be open and honest and transparent and vulnerable and go, okay, take a look at all of it, and then come back, because that's going to be that truly authentic report back to go, yeah, I am a 5 out of 10. And in order for my company to do what I need to do, I need to upskill me, because maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm the struggle. And I think when we think about being inquisitive, it's saying, I am not the smartest person in the room, but I'm going to mobilize and equip and upskill myself, but upskill the team to make sure that I have the right people at the table.
Absolutely. You nailed it. Working with John Maxwell for 10 years, right? Number one leadership expert in the world. It's been very eye-opening, obviously, and being able to teach his concepts and being able to trying to take those into organizations. I found it was hard to get in to go, let's work on leadership development. No. Just work with our team. So I'm like, okay, I'll work with your team if you want them to all quit, because I'm going to develop them and they're going to go somewhere else. And then you're just frustrated. But one of the primary reasons why we started building out Law of the Levers and creating this assessment is to go through and start asking these questions and think, oh, I didn't think about that. Oh, I didn't think about this area. Because Law of the Lid, it goes back to the Law of the Lid. I try to teach it to everybody I possibly can, because they're not aware that they have put a cap on the business. Who is ultimately making the decision? The business owner or leader, right, of the organization. So as they start going through this assessment, they're like, oh, wow, yeah, this is an issue. Oh, we do have that symptom. We do have that problem. And then we trace it back and we diagnose where this is coming from. Almost every time it comes back from a decision that the business leader made. And what I found is the reason I like this is, and again, I'm not picking on business. I'm a business owner. I make the same mistakes, right? All day long. My business partner's like, why are you doing that? We're having this issue because you made this decision. Yeah, Law of the Lever. It's because leaders don't like hearing that they're the problem. And they don't typically like people challenging their authority. And so I found, like, if this was a gentle and easy way to get above the business and look at it holistically and go, what's really going on? Then they could start to identify these areas and go, oh, crap. I need some help, right? And that's why specifically my framework, right? My 4-part framework is we assess, analyze and evaluate. And then I coach the leader. And a lot of times I just do that, right? So if it's a solopreneur, I just do that to help them continue to grow, to make better decisions.
Again, we're blessed to be in this Nashville ecosystem of entrepreneurship, which is amazing. But from your background and your experience, if there had been leaders that had said, you know what, I want to evaluate my business and I want to be honest and I want to know what I need to do to improve me. It's not about pointing fingers. It's about looking at those 3 fingers that are pointing back at me.
Yeah.
How many startups, how many businesses do you think would still be around, right? If those leaders had taken that little bit of humble pie and said, you know what, evaluate and evaluate me too. And let's be curious and let's be inquisitive and let's really look at this no matter what. And even if I'm the problem, that's okay. From your stance, like, how many companies would have made it?
I think a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to evaluate. I mean, literally, this is a primary reason why I started my coaching and consulting business. I was very fortunate to be surrounded by some highly accomplished entrepreneurs in my career. One of my primary mentors has built 9 multi-million-dollar businesses. And I'm like, I'm going to listen to everything you say. And I'm going to learn from your mistakes. And I'm going to learn from your successes. But also, I can't do it the way he did it, because I'm not him. We have different backgrounds, experiences, education level, connections, network. Like, I can't do it his way. And that's one of the things I loved about the way he approached. He's like, I'm going to mentor you in what I've done and how I did it and the ways that worked and didn't work for me, but would also coach me and helping me find my way of doing it. I'm not going to get on my soapbox about what coaching is and is not, because a lot of people out there call themselves coaches and they don't coach. They're a mentor or consultant or anyway. I will not get on that soapbox after right now. So, but I think it would dramatically improve, because if you look at the stats, over 50% of small businesses fail within the first, year, 2 years. 80% fail before the first 10 years.
Right.
Well, why? So if we look at what is the result? They fail. Why? Mostly what I found, and I'm open to be proven wrong. What I found is most of them think the same way all the others think. And they're not truly thinking and evaluating, what did everybody else do and how could I do that differently? Not from innovation and all that, but just from the thinking part, right?
It's the learning what to do, also learning what not to do, right? So it's learning from both those angles, both those lenses. But then additionally, it's saying, I am going to take what I've learned and I'm going to say what serves me in my business today.
Yes.
Because I may be exposed to something now that doesn't serve me today, but in a year it may serve me.
Yep.
And I think it's that people think, oh, I'm just going to, it's a recipe. It's XYZ. I just need to do this recipe just the exact same way and I'm going to have success. Whereas it takes that moment to say, okay, I'm learning a lot of what to do. I'm learning a lot of what not to do. And then taking that and bringing it through your own lens and your own business lens and going, okay, what serves me in this moment today? What could serve me in the future, or what doesn't serve me at all? And I think you have to slow down to speed up.
Yes.
You have to be present, right? You also have to be extremely confident in, okay, I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail fast, but I'm going to fail forward.
Yeah.
And then also saying, I'm also going to really exercise my resilience in this, because there has to be resilience and patience. There has to be resilience in, that didn't work, let's try the next thing. But there also has to be resilience in, but I read this book, I heard this podcast, I did all the things, I did the recipe, it's still not working. But they didn't put it through their own lens and go, would this work for me or not work for me?
Yeah. So I've got this printed. I have to show you that. So we have a workshop, right? And we do, can do a 5-minute, 10, a keynote on law of the lever. So we show this image, right? I was like, if any of you are like me, you probably have a massive bookcase full of books, right?
Many books.
And they sell those books to solve a problem. Mm-hmm. Or they wouldn't sell the book, right? The whole goal is like, they wrote a book to help you solve a problem. So most people are like, oh, I got this book. And I obviously I'm, showing you I do the same thing. I have this problem. I'm going to go get this book and I'm going to apply it to solve this problem. But when they go in and they start changing things, look, it's just like when brilliant things come out, fireworks go off. I love it. When you start changing things in your business, you have to change the other parts. So when someone implements, some frameworks that I love, like StoryBrand, like you go and implement StoryBrand into your messaging, well, you also have to change the other components of your organization. Or we use DISC. If I go and start teaching DISC to an organization, we're changing how they do things. So I always go, great, now that you know how to identify people's communication style, okay, what are you going to do now? Are you going to go back and look at the emails that you sent? What do you mean? Like, you just learned this fantastic tool about how to better communicate with people, but you don't go back and rewrite your emails using keywords and structure, right? Or they learn Working Genius, for example, and then they don't change the way they hold their internal meetings. What? Like, the reason they're like, well, we tried that, it didn't work. It's because you didn't look at it. overall.
Holistic.
Sorry, I get
And,
obviously very excited.
also, you have to, when a transformation happens in one area, it impacts and waterfalls. There's a ripple effect that happens.
Yeah.
Right. Within a team, within an organization. It's the same thing that happens when we're going through our own personal transformations, right? Like if a mom is transformed, right, then there's going to be a transformation in the marriage. There's going to be a transformation with the kids, right? There's all these transformations that take place.
We literally put it into like, you're pulling this lever and it's not working. Why? Oh my God. I love it.
Exactly.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that I was talking to some of my mentees about at the Wondery, and you and I both mentor there, which is a great program. And they talk a lot about in the Ideator program, which is their entry level program, and that's the customer discovery. But what we were talking about is the customer discovery should never stop. Because as the organization continues to change and evolve and grow, you need to go back to those customers and redo the customer discovery. And so we were actually talking about the importance of customer discovery in that ideator track, but then also it's just as important in the builder track and it's just as important in the founder track. And I think so many times it ties in with what you're saying is you have to continue to do that customer discovery, whether it's your internal customer or your external customer, but you have to continue to ask the questions like I got tiny humans and they're constantly asking me, why? What does this mean? Why? But as business owners, as founders, as entrepreneurs, we have to keep asking those questions of, well, why? And what does this do? And how does this apply? And if we don't, our businesses are not going to transform for that growth and that scale.
Absolutely. And I love that you bring up the constant customer discovery. And I got to give kudos to Dina, the CEO of Couture Technologies that I work with. She's fantastic at customer discovery, like amazing. And just a business model expert. I think she's seen over 500 business models at this point, kind of mentored over a lot of people through the Wondery. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about her approach to, the tech that we've built is that it is evolving. We had one product starting out. We were trying to solve reduce returns, increase conversions, and create a better customer experience online. And we had virtual try-on, virtual fitting. And then we're doing discovery and we're having conversations with potential clients. And we recognized through that process that, there's for lack of better phrasing, a drop-down product that people need right now that maybe they're not ready for virtual fitting. And it was this interactive digital lookbook where you can go. I always talk about it like Clueless. Did you ever see Clueless?
Yeah.
It's like Cher's Closet, right? So we created this version of Cher's Closet where you can have an avatar and you can mix and match clothes and you can build outfits, and it's more interactive and it's playful and it's fun and it's kind of gamified, right? And so that product took off.
And you wouldn't have gotten there if you hadn't kept asking questions and being inquisitive and doing those customer discoveries, right? And I think that that's what so many entrepreneurs miss is you may think your product is so incredible because you're so close to it. But until you are starting to get the world's input on it and their use cases, you're not going to know its true impact.
Absolutely. Well, yes, I'm going to yes and that. My friend Laura will be very excited, and her husband Barry. It's an improv thing. They're going to be very excited. I have to tell her that I used it. Yes, and same thing for salespeople. I work a lot with sales teams, and how do we increase sales and profitability is kind of a pillar of what I do. And unfortunately, so many sales, there's a lot that they do wrong. But one of the things that they do is because they're trying to get to the yes or always be closing. So they're like, okay, what is the problem? I gotta solve the problem. It's like, well, let's just take it from an approach of like what I call a discovery set. Let's just go into the conversation of learning and trying to understand their perspective and ask questions instead of telling people how great your stuff is, like ask them, because maybe there's other things that they're struggling with that you could fix and could solve. That's where Lookbook X came from. We were on a call with a retailer out of Canada, and we just kept talking and kept asking questions. And okay, tell me about the challenge that you're facing. And they do a thing with suiting, and we're like, okay, well, you're trying to sell suits and little swatches, and you're trying to get the guy to go, now imagine this all over your body. He's like, I can't see plaid all over it. I was like, well, what if we just had an interactive way where you could put a suit on an avatar and show them hundreds of swatches and let them mix and match? And they're like, that'd be amazing. I'm like, okay, go back to the team, go, can we build this? Yeah, we can do that easily. Great. Let's sell it. And you're right. But to your point, it wouldn't have happened if on the call we're not being curious and asking questions and seeking to understand instead of like trying to jump and close the sale.
Yep. Oh, amazing. So many good nuggets, Danny. All right. For the final question, what are you powerfully choosing in 2024?
Okay. What am I powerfully choosing? In a word, I would say simplicity. And that goes everything. If you've met me, I wear a lot of hats. It's simple. I don't have to fix my hair. If most people that know I'm usually wearing a denim shirt or a denim jacket or something. You know what? It's simple. It's easy. It's my black turtleneck. It's my gray t-shirt, right? I just wear denim. It's easy. Denim on denim, go. Simplicity. We're purging like so much stuff in our house right now. I was nervous about scanning the camera earlier because we're just like pulling everything out of cabinets and closets and simplicity in my own personal growth. I've identified several areas where are my strengths, right? Where I'm more skilled and talented and gifted. And I'm just focusing on being narrow and deep instead of wide and shallow. And I always say, I'm usually good at about 5 things. Outside of that, you don't want me doing it. Quick example, my wife was in here installing a drawer in our cabinet. She's got a drill and she's sawing stuff. Nope. You know what? I did the laundry, I cooked the food, and I took the trash out. I'll give the dog a bath. You don't want me messing with power tools, right? I married up. It's great. But also in business too, I found just going through this piece of diagnosing and reflecting back on, everything in corporate retail, everything with all the companies I've worked with, is a lot of times they just overly complicate the business. And I keep constantly going back to my clients and go, okay, how do we make this simple? How do we make it simple to understand? How do we make it simple to sell? How do we make it simple to recruit? How do we make it simple to hire people? How do we make it simple so that you have time and financial freedom and you haven't overly complicated the business so much that you're working 60, 80 hours a week and just trying to keep your head above water? Like, let's just go back to basics. Let's simplify. So simplicity.
I think it's so important in this day and age, right? We are in this constant go, go, go society. We're in this constant like complexity. We've got to make it bigger, brighter. And at the same time, I think that there's a lot of forces that are saying, let's keep it simple. I have tiny humans that I can talk to that remind me to keep it at their level so that they can understand it and understand the concepts, right? I think so many times we think, as entrepreneurs too, and, you and I get this as we mentor a lot, is they think, oh, I need to solution the world. I need to fix the world. I need to change the world. Whereas actually they would change the world and be more impactful if they would narrow and they would bring it back to what is the intention? What is the why? And let's hone that and let's get really good at that. And then, yes, there could be other use cases and there could be other groups that you impact, but let's bring it back to this. I heard an entrepreneur just this morning say, we're going to really focus on the Nashville market. We're going to really get really good at launching it here in the Nashville market before we take it to other markets. And I think that so many times people go, oh, I have to go big or go home. And it's like, no, you can actually bring it back. And I think that concept of simplicity aligns so well with slowing down to speed up.
Absolutely. Most of the time, one of my mentors said, look, wherever you are, like 10-mile radius, they're like, for most businesses, you can retire just by selling within a 10-mile radius. I get like, we're going to be the global, like world's best coffee. Great. Can you sell it to the shop down the street? Let's start there. And it makes me think, I was working with a client recently and they went through another program, fantastic program, but they were very adamant about their business plan. Again, I'm not saying anything negatively about business plans. I think you should have a growth strategy, but they were so adamant about this person having everything figured out in this business plan. And I said, what's your goal? They're like, well, and I was like, okay, first of all, let's focus on the goal. And I said, unfortunately, there's 5 mistakes in goal setting. And one of the ones is that you fall in love with the plan, not the goal. And I said, and you're stressed out about this plan. And I said, let's focus on the goal. And what can you do right now? Like this is a phrase, and I'll share this, is what could you do that if you would do, you would see better results? And they're like, I need to call these 5 potential clients. I'm like, then do that. Well, what about my plan? I don't care. Call the 5 clients
now.
And then go, now what could you do? And then go do that. So simplicity. I'm very simple.
And it gets back to the I talk about the prioritization model of now, next, later, right? What can you do now? What can go next? What can go later? And again, that now could be today, the next could be tomorrow, the later could be the next day, or it can be now is this semester, or is this quarter, and next is next quarter. Whatever it is, it can be agile and flexible. But so many times people, it's bringing it back a couple levels and saying, you're too big, you're too high. Let's bring it back down and bring that simplistic view of what can you do now that can make an impact that's going to be intentionally impactful.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Danny, I feel like we could talk all day, which is amazing.
This is an 8-hour podcast.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to our listeners. And we appreciate you joining us on this journey. And you'll be sure to look for Danny's contact information in our show notes. Danny, thank you for being on. And to our listeners, don't forget to get shit done.
Thanks for listening to the GSD Factor podcast. If you liked this episode, please rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, where you can also find previous episodes. Let's also connect on LinkedIn and Instagram. If you're looking for more information on the GSD Factor, visit us at gsdfactor.com. And always remember to GSD, get shit done.